my name is Megan Edwards of Focus Communications, and today we're getting another update on behalf of Timberline Resources, which trades on the OTCQB under the symbol TLRS and the Toronto Stock Exchange under the symbol TBR. And joining me today is Timberline's President and CEO, Patrick Highsmith. Patrick, thank you for coming on the show. Nice to see you again.
Hi, Megan. Great to see you as well. Thanks for having me on.
So before we get into the latest results, could you give our listeners an overview of the Eureka project and the targets you've been advancing over the last 18 months?
Absolutely, Megan. We're, as probably the audience will remember, Timberline is focused exclusively in Nevada. We're a pure gold play, and we're going to be spending time today just talking about our Eureka project, which is down by the town of Eureka, our namesake there. And this slide allows people to see the lay of the land. Megan, we're right outside of the town of Eureka, and the red curvy line on the right-hand side is Highway 50. And that shows our land position there. We have about 70 square kilometers. This was historically a big silver, lead, zinc producer in the late 1800s. But in about 1990, Carlin-type gold was discovered here in significant abundance by Homestake and mined by Homestake and Barrick. There was, prior to that in the 80s, a small amount of historic production as well. These are Carlin-type gold deposits, and that's what we're exploring for on the Eureka project. And in the last couple of years, folks have been hearing primarily about our results from this part of the property here. It's called the Lookout Trend. We have a 500,000 ounce resource in that area. And sort of most importantly, we have a recent high-grade discovery there called the Waterwell Zone. And I guess the last thing of note here, when you look at a map like this, you can see our neighbor to the north. I-80 Gold operates the Ruby Hill Archimedes complex to the north of us. Same belt of rocks. We call it the Eureka Gold Belt because this camp used to be all about silver, but it's about gold these days. However, I-80 and ourselves are still drilling some gold as well.
Now, Patrick, yesterday the company announced additional results from the northern part of the Waterwell Zone, where you intersected more gold mineralization as well as some silver, lead, zinc mineralization. Could you run us through these results?
Absolutely, Megan. We've zoomed in now to that Lookout Mountain resource area there and the Waterwell Zone just to the east of it. And as we look at this map here, I would point out that that red outline there is around the known Lookout Mountain resource, and the red discs there and the purple discs are grade thickness of gold, Megan. So it kind of shows a cluster of big red discs over in the resource area. And then if you look just to the east of that, a nice and growing cluster of big red discs that constitutes the Waterwell Zone discovery. Just look at the northern edge of it here. This is the area we're talking about. And right up in that area, we've just announced several holes there that we announced this week. And that includes a really nice run in one of them, 17 meters of 2.64 grams per ton, which included a higher grade section, 4.6 meters of 4.5 grams per ton. Now that was one of the northernmost holes in the Waterwell Zone. And as we drilled up in that area, Megan, we realized we've hit a bunch of faults up there. The earth's been sort of chopped up and the zone's jumping around on us there. So if we look closely at this map, right across here are where the holes were drilled, Megan. And in the first hole, we hit a little bit of gold, as you can see, 221, had 6 meters of almost 2 grams. And then as we realized there was a bunch of faulting in that area, we actually drilled these holes out to the north. And if you look closely there, you can see there that those holes go out to the north and around that big red disc, which was a great hit we reported earlier this year, 44 meters of over 4 grams per ton. So what did we learn from this? You can see we hit several narrow runs of gold mineralization there. But if you look further down on those bullet points, you'll see that hole 237C hit significant amounts of silver. In total, we had over 200 meters of highly anomalous silver, including a run of 79 meters of over 8 grams, 30 meters of over 12 grams silver. And those are highlighted with the little blue discs there that you can see on the screen. So this is telling us that at the northern end of the Waterwell Zone, there's a big fault in there. The zone's been broken up. We have Carlin-type gold to the south and these silver occurrences to the north of that. And as we show on this map right there, Megan, those are different rocks when you go to the north. We've labeled those as Siluro-Ordovician. Those are slightly younger rocks, but those Ordovician rocks in that part of the world are important host rocks just north of us at I-80 Gold's project. So the real big takeaway for us is the water well zone is still present. We've got some nice hits in it and the same contact between the Dunderberg and the Hamburg formations. However, it seems to be chopped off to the north by this big fault. But north of it, we found some more gold and we found nice big runs of silver there. So we're kind of putting the big picture together. We see evidence for the silver system that underlies all of this. The later gold system, the Carlin type stuff we're drilling came in later there. It's still present, but it's been faulted up to the north. And we've got more work to do to piece all that together.
Right. And there is a hole that I see a little bit farther north. That's kind of a large step out from the other drilling. What happened there?
Yeah, that's a great point. That hole to the north, right up in here, was kind of a wildcat hole, Megan. We jumped off there several hundred meters because if you see those little triangles around it, those indicate a rock chip samples up to 5 grams per ton. We were out prospecting in that area this summer. We saw alteration. We saw Carlin type mineralization there. Got up to 5 grams per ton in surface samples, and that was about a 450 meter RC hole. So it's kind of a wildcat hole. But we hit a nice little run at the surface of just under a gram per ton in that hole and long stretches of anomalous gold in it. So really the story there, Megan, is we've gotten out into what we call the relay zone, this area here where there's a couple of big faults, as I mentioned. We're in the Ordovician host rocks that host the Ruby Hill complex to the north of us, quite a bit of it. And this is the first time we've drilled significant gold in these Ordovician host rocks, which we know were a big host farther north. So the other thing I'd point out is just look about 400 or 500 meters to the northwest. You see that target up there called the Rocky Canyon Zone. And up there to the far northwest, up in this part of the screen up there, that is a really good target where we've got high-grade gold from historic drilling. So if we tie all this together with all these little bits and pieces fitting together, you can see there are now kilometers of strike length of anomalous gold. And we've also got this silver system ripping through there. So pretty exciting. It is real exploration work, and it's early in these part of the targets, Megan. So we're really anxious to see how things piece together as we go further south. And I'll just take a quick look here. This is a slice through the earth, what we call a long section, to show you in summary what I was talking about earlier. You can see here on the right-hand side of the screen that this hole 220 hit that nice run of high-grade mineralization on the right-hand side of the screen. And I've drawn in this black dashed line, Megan, and that's where we hit a big fault there. So we sort of had really good mineralization up to that fault, and it kind of drops off to the north, and we get into a different set of rocks to the north. But as I said, we already know there's some gold and silver in those rocks too. Now, if we slice through the earth and look north instead of west, you'll see it gets even more complicated. I think I can explain this. Right in this area is where we're talking about. And you see the histograms on that drill hole showing the thick high-grade intercept, 44 meters of 4.1 grams. Now that we've got holes on either side of it, we realize there are additional faults in here that are chopping up these rocks, okay? And the interesting thing about these faults is they've raised an area up here with a lot of potential, and these faults themselves can be the feeder zones that brought the fluids into this part of the water well zone. So the water well zone is still present. It's been chopped up a little bit, and it leaves us more targets to test as these as we can show this area has sort of been sliced and diced, and these red dashed areas are indicating some of the new targets. And we've got a much better understanding of the geology down there, Megan.
Right, and that's kind of what I was going to ask. The water well zone has been a focus for the company for the year, expanding the zone in all directions. Do you feel you're starting to get a handle on the geology of this newly discovered deposit?
Importantly, Megan, we've been drilling with core holes this year primarily, and the core gives us a much better geological record. So something like the faults that you see on this map, on this cross section, we really wouldn't have had much insight to that if we were only drilling RC. So I would say, yes, we've really developed our understanding here. And yes, these deposits tend to be chopped up with lots of faults. But the good side of those faults is they're often the fluid pathways into these rocks as well. So if you look at that area there that I've circled, a lot of those are drill targets for follow-up work. And also off to the east, remember, there's this big IP anomaly down here that we've been talking about for years now, almost 2 years now. And every time we drill and get close to it, we find either a bit of silver or a bit of gold. So more work to do on the deeper targets, but we're also figuring out the main part of the water well zone quite nicely.
And to finish things off, Patrick, could you run us through what investors can look for from Timberline during the remainder of 2022 and going into early 2023?
I suppose the best part of having to wait for your assays so long as we've been waiting in Nevada is once they start coming in, you're finally sort of caught up and they should be pretty regular. So we expect a couple of more news releases during the last part of 2022. And those results will primarily be from probably the south part of the water well zone down in here. We're very excited about that. We've already extended that zone another 75 meters south with this year's drill program. We've now offset it a bit more to the east and the west. We've also tested it much further south. And we'll also go over to the Oswego zone across the valley, where we drilled some high-grade oxide mineralization and reported that earlier this year as well. And we put 3 more holes into the Oswego zone as well. So we'll end the year with good, strong news flow going forward here. A couple more news releases before the end of the year.
Thank you so much, Patrick. We're continuing to watch closely as the footprint of Eureka continues to grow. Is there anything that you want to leave our listeners with before we close?
I guess I would say the fun part of what's happening now is, Megan, we're seeing how discoveries are made. And quite frankly, we've got a number of holes. We've grown the water well zone a lot. We understand it a lot better. But you're right in the thick of drilling in and around these high-grade pods of mineralization. Sometimes you're right on the edge of one, sometimes you're right in the middle, and sometimes you're in between. So stay tuned and watch how discoveries unfold, because we think we've got a significant Carlin-type discovery happening here at Eureka.
All right, Patrick. Thank you so much for your time. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you. See you next time.